Okay. Yo.
Okay.
Cool. Fuck, man. Glitter has got to be like the worst of the, like amongst the worst of these movies.
Yeah.
It's about the worst I've ever experienced. It's no worse than anything else I'd previously experienced, but it's just right at that level. Like, it reminds me of Hellraiser 3. I said that already, but really, it's that level of like. It seems to really hook into the pagan sacrifice aspects of this, whatever this thing is, you know? It's that area of the unconscious. There's a lot of that, like, icky feeling on it.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean. It's very difficult to describe. I have no idea what to say about it, to be honest. Like,
well, for me, it begins with the all the stuff in the 80s club, you know?
Yeah.
This Dionysian kind of festival energy. But the stuff that you see like the moon person and the sun person and all of this.
Yeah.
It's like Eyes Wide Shut almost. You know, it's got that look of like a satanic, like, elite party or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Am I reading?
Yeah.
Am I? Yeah.
No, it's Yes. No. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So it starts there, and then I was just rewatching some of it, you know, in preparation for this chat. And do you know the music video they shoot right after she gets signed and she sleeps with Dice and everything? And then they're making that music video, and there's that like European director or something, you know.
Yeah.
That video is of a witch burning, because the dancers have flames painted on them, and they're moving up around Mariah, and he's like narrating it even. He's like flames, you know, hug her body. Now she's engulfed in the flames, you know. So it is like
no
a
sense.
You know.
I know, like that stuff really freaks me out because, like, what were they thinking? Like, I'm just curious to know what the process was behind this, because it seems unlikely that they would do this sort of without being aware that just a few scenes earlier her whole house burned down in flames, and that is part of her big trauma. Like, they know this. They're writing this movie. So the question is, if her trauma has to do with fire, and that's the whole point, right? That this music video is slightly traumatic for her as well. She's like uncomfortable a little bit, right? It's like, why are you mixing the trauma about the fire with this music video? It never like explicitly gets mentioned in the movie. There's all this stuff that's obviously like an artistic choice, but it's so, I mean, it's cool in a sense. Like, artistically, it's interesting. It's very subtle. It's a very weirdly sort of subtle movie, despite being so like
it is
trashy in some ways. It's so that's definitely one of the first things. I didn't notice that till the second time round. That also freaked me out.
Yeah. I completely didn't track what that was about.
No. And that's frightening in a sense, because you realize this is the kind of movie that I would imagine most people would just watch once. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's just you know, you just watch this movie. So the fact that there are things in it that you just it's dense enough stylistically that you don't notice this until the second time round. The second time round, you're like, wait, this guy is describing fire. Like, the dancers are supposed to be fire, like going up over her.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Anyway,
in an
I
image
don't know.
with twins, you know, it's got those two white orbs that are on either side of it. So it's this like symmetrical witch burning thing with the glitter pouring down as well. It's the second instance of like a glitter effect that we get. The first time, it's that actual glitter crossfade on Mariah's face, which happens right after she meets Dice at the club, you know? And then we kind of loop back around. Now Billy and Dice are deeper together. They're a couple now. And then we get that glitter fade again, except now it's this actual like silver glitter falling down in the music video. And later we hear the director talking about it, and he says it has to be more like flickering and like a fish moving. You know, he's describing to the glitter person how to do the glitter effect and likening it to a fish, which is such a weird bit of dialogue to have there, but especially in relation to this S image stuff, because I think the explosion looks like a goldfish often, you know.
Right. And I think, yeah, like he's describing, I think the flames too, right? It's got to flicker like a flame.
Yeah. It tells you that the glitter effect is meant to exist in relation to flames in a ritual sacrifice image, basically.
Yeah, right.
That's what the glitter is.
Yeah.
The glitter is like a fire thing that happens when she's burned at the stake on a music video that this guy's filming. It's the big end tower filming it again, like in the image again.
Yeah.
It's so persistent.
Yeah.
And the trauma, you know, it's wrapped up together right at the beginning because the house burns down in connection to like she's already a singer on stage singing with her mom and all this stuff, you know. That's kind of specific and weird. You know, you wouldn't have to make the narrative that way. I wouldn't necessarily think to make it that way. Maybe, you know, normally people don't discover they're like amazing singers until a little later in life. So it's interesting that they make her like a child super talent or something.
Right, I see what you mean.
But yeah, it's already pre-connected. The issues of performance and art making and singing and all of this, with the notion of the house burning down. And just like with the music video, there's an exploitative aspect to her performance as a child. You know, she's kind of acting as a crutch to support her mother that can't get through the show because she's like a high functioning alcoholic.
Yeah.
So it's like light child abuse actually.
Yeah.
The house burning down actually rescues her from that situation in a sense. She no longer has to be the child taking care of a dysfunctional mother. Now she's in this other family with like sisters, and we see that kind of montage where it shows you that she had more or less a loving, normal childhood from that point forward, it seems, except a lonely one, haunted by the initial trauma and loss of connection with her biological mother.
Yeah.
And so then when the stuff with the record company happens, it's like she's forced to relive her trauma in a light exposure therapy sort of setting that isn't like that, though. It's to make money off of her, you know. She's kind of forced to do that in order to share her gift with the world, just like she was forced to go through this weird thing with her mother to sing when she was a child. So the movie's definitely like that's all really tightly thematically stacked. I think there's no question that it's like a movie about trauma again, which is I realize like I don't know much about Mariah Carey's bio. How much of this is autobiographical? Like I don't really know anything about her.
Yeah,
Why
no,
about all this stuff. You know?
I know. Like I just did a quick read of some stuff. All I saw is that her mother was a singer. I think her mother was like a famous singer. That's all I know. Yeah. But I also feel like in this movie, Billy. Okay, this is really weird to say somehow. I feel as if people are taking advantage of her, and I think that in order for her to learn to deal with that situation or to heal from it in some way, she has to do the opposite somehow. She needs to take advantage of someone else, and I think that she does in a strange way, in the sense that I think the movie in some weird way is signaling that she is using Dice as a genie. He's like a genie in a bottle that makes her wishes come true. And in the end, her final biggest wish that she could ever imagine, singing in whatever the name of that venue is now, the big venue.
Madison Square Garden. Right?
Yeah, Madison Square Garden. It needs Dice to die. Dice needs to die in order for that to happen. There's a weird kind of like inverse sacrifice. Thing. I don't know. I felt there was some weird story about that as well.
Well, this whole business with Dice's death and all of this. First of all, I have to say I feel like way less familiar with the second half of this film than with the first half at this point. That's just a function of like where a lot of the 9/11 stuff is. I'm just like looping through the first half of this thing over and over again. But my memory of this, right, is that. Well, so first of all, what's the name of the other character?
Timothy Walker?
Is it Timothy? Who the producer that like Dice pilfers? Really? Timothy. He's very much like a pimp, isn't he? I mean, he's kind of dressed like that with the fedora. And he's clearly like a gangster of some kind because he kills Dice. Ultimately. So he has no problem just using violence like that, and he even refers to himself as Daddy, right? When he's talking to Dice, he's like, he's like you're gonna have to make it worth Daddy's time or something like that. I'm not sure exactly what he says. That's how he demands compensation for it, though.
Right. Could be,
sure. And he's kind of presented in a way as a toxic version of Dice or something. Do you know what I mean? He's like Dice. He's like this other producer that's this obvious kind of like shadow character in like coats and like hats. And who was using Billy in a much more direct kind of way somehow, just using her voice in order to prop up somebody else's celebrity, It's like kind of like the most exploitative version of like using Billy's talent that we've seen maybe in the movie. I have to take a drag off my pen. Hold on.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm confused about Dice though, and I don't know Dice's relationship to Timothy.
There's kind of like four forces, I guess, over the course of the movie that are trying to use Billy's talent in some way. The mother was using Billy's talent to I don't know how to say it, like to survive her own addiction or something.
Right.
You know? Timothy is using Billy's talent to make a record in this particular fake manufactured kind of way. It's also like the least authentic. It's like a Milli Vanilli situation or something, you know? You're seeing one person, you're hearing someone else. It's, you know,
right, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
He has no interest in Billy's well-being whatsoever. To him, she's purely a utility, like a slave almost, who just provides this like element that he needs to construct his Frankenstein celebrity moneymaker thing. So he's you know, and the fact that it's like women, I feel like this issue of like pimping and exploitation is really in there, especially because then we see the record company, is that like the kind of the third element along with Dice, you know, which makes it technically 4, I guess. It's like we've got the mother, Timothy, the record label people, and then Dice. You know, those are all the kind of the main ones. The record company is exploiting her now in a directly sexual way because they're trying to use her body to sell the album, right? That's what happens during the scene where we see her being immolated symbolically. They're like, you know, it's a sacrifice of her something. Agency, dignity, or at least the movie's playing with these aspects, it seems to me. I'm not sure what it's saying necessarily about all that, because Dice, you see, comes in with a very guarded attitude, actually, towards all that. On the surface, it's like Dice is trying to protect Billy from the record label sharks, because the movie's kind of trying to show us, on some level anyway, Dice is like the first person who actually wants to see Billy use her talent to better Billy, you know? However, he ends up becoming possessive, I think, a little bit about her, right? Such that he storms out of the entire music video project. It's like Billy was uncomfortable, but seemed to be okay, actually, making that sacrifice. It's Dice that then storms off, and then Billy has to convince Dice to try to smooth it over, you know? It's like there's an aspect of like Billy can, you know, yes, the record company is exploiting her, but also Billy can use her sexuality in a calculated way to realize her dream. And it's like a pragmatic thing almost, like a decision that she's made. And Dice ends up kind of getting in the way of that. Yeah. So it's interesting, therefore, that Timothy ends up killing Dice, excuse me, Bryce. Yeah. Bryce Canyon. It's like a place. Dice. Because it actually does relate to a failing in Dice's character. He doesn't just kill Dice out of nowhere. Dice refuses to pay him. They, you know, he says it's a bullshit deal, but they still made this deal. And it's kind of just like, once Dice has some power, once he's like the big hotshot producer, suddenly he thinks he can just not pay this guy, which he totally could now, because what's $100,000 to Dice now that they're in this big world of big record label money and all this?
Timothy, I think, like, even says this when he appears in their house. He's like, did you ever ask yourself where all this nice stuff came from, or something like that? He's sort of implying, you know, you guys have a lot of money. Kind of thing. Yeah, so there's definitely something about that in here.
Well, and what Dice says to him is, he says, is there food on your table or something like that? He says, you know, if you ever run out, come to me and then we'll talk about this one, you know, which is such a brutal, dismissive thing to say, you know. It happens right after he storms out of that music video too, so it's connected to that event, you know. That's like the moment where I think Timothy decides, I'm going to kill Dice someday. I'm going to get my money in this, my money's worth in this other way. And it's right there in connection with the big, weird ritual sacrifice music video scene. So, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think also like Dice's behavior, like I've got to say I don't like Dice.
Yeah, I don't like Dice.
I don't like Dice.
Something about it is the actor and the way he delivers the dialogue seems very ingenuine to me or something at times, and so that influences it. But I also don't like his actual actions, like the sort of the decisions he makes at various points. In the movie either.
It's funny you mentioned the acting, because you're right, that is definitely part of it. And so we both said that this reminds us of The Room,
yes,
the Tommy Wiseau movie, and I feel that something similar happened with Dice, because he's not a bad actor. I think like the actor who plays Dice, there's a lot of like, in fact I would say he's a good actor. It's just that
I think I like the actor.
Exactly.
I don't like the character. How the characters coming together. Yeah.
I think there's some sort of weird discrepancy between how he's delivering it and what the rest of the movie is. It's sort of like a weird version of a Nicolas Cage movie, where Nicolas Cage sort of is out of touch with the rest of the vibe of the movie. It's not exactly the same.
Like that. It is. It's quite close to that. Yeah.
There's some weird thing, and then there's just the total sort of like, he has a similar kind of jealousy as Johnny's character has in The Room. But there's also like for example the way he these are all just details, but I think they're important somehow. In the first sort of date they have, right? He sort of greets her with a limousine and a rose. Obviously, he's super like Wiseau. And then
what the fuck?
And then they go to a restaurant, and then Billy all the time is like, is this a date? Are you flirting with me? He's like, no. And then he's like, do you want to come up to my place? No, I don't want to. He insists in a particularly sort of intense way. I think it's sort of partly there's this sort of thing with Dice's character that's a bit sort of tragic, I think, as well, that I feel like Dice's character is also a heavily this is my own fandom kind of interpretation, but I feel that he's also like heavily traumatized or something. He has the particular sort of like jumpiness, of someone who's very deeply like insecure or something.
God, it's really interesting because we know absolutely nothing about Dice's past,
Yeah.
He's this total, just where does Dice come from? He's, I like that. No, I think you're right. Well, that probably accounts for the authenticity of the connection between Billy and Dice. They really do have a love, because it's they see that tragedy in one another, and that's also what makes the story actually tragic when Dice dies, because although there are complications in that relationship, and like you said, we kind of maybe don't even like Dice that much, etc. It had aspects of an actual love affair, I would say. It's interesting that this movie can be that nuanced. It's really pretty well written, I think. It's so weird energetically that it kind of seems like it's badly written, like when you pick the story apart later, you see, it's actually really thematically rich, and but like while you're watching it, everything is so weirdly off-putting that I can see why it got the reputation of being badly written. It's not actually a problem in the writing. It's a problem in the whole aesthetic totality of the movie. It's a movie of very weird, jarring right angles and things that
yes.
don't,
I think
don't
this is
gather.
what.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh. I think this is what bothers me about this movie, because exactly when you look at it, apparently I don't know much about the director, but he made apparently his first movie was like a pretty sort of like a cult kind of indie sort of movie. He
I don't know much about him
seems
either.
he seems like he has a few sort of not arty movies, but like it seems like I don't know, like he's not just like a blockbuster kind of director. The story was written by a playwright, apparently, by some interesting. Then adapted by a script writer or whatever. It has all the elements of like there's some sort of, and you can tell in the movie. That's the thing. That just the fact that the second watch through reveals stuff.
Yeah.
And it reveals stuff naturally. You see, because we've watched movies where the second watch through reveals stuff if you're a synchead.
Yeah.
This movie reveals stuff, I think, naturally. I think anyone would see these things.
I agree.
I almost feel as if this movie didn't have Mariah Carey in it, maybe it would be a better movie in the sense that maybe less pressure would have been put on the producers to make it this way or that way or whatever.
Yeah. I do think opinion is starting to change about it a little bit. It's got its fans now, definitely.
Okay. Yeah.
I think at the time, and also in the context of 9/11 and stuff, it was just one of those movies that just got lost in the shuffle of that.
It would be So go on.
Sorry. Oh, I was just gonna say, there's so many like directions we could go in with glitter, but the fact that this movie looks nothing like the 1980s, but is set in the 1980s, is profoundly strange to me, because the movie just really looks like 2001. It doesn't look like anything other than the period in which it was made. It's just a very accurate document of New York City right before 9/11 happened.
Right.
Shockingly close to when it happens. It's a very nice portrait of New York life, despite the fact that it's trying to be a period piece. It's so weird. It's trying to show you the 1980s, but then it keeps kind of accidentally in the details giving away, nope, this is actually a document of immediately pre-9/11 New York City. Which is the inverse mirror of how a movie like Back to the Future works, which is actually a movie in the 80s that seems to have details that suggest New York City circa 9/11. Here's this glitter movie that is constructing a false 1980s and failing to do so in a present that is New York City 9/11. Maybe it's not the opposite, but it's strangely related in a way. And it's weird to me, therefore, when they go out and they're like Billy and her friends go out on that shopping spree and they buy clothes and they look like they're in like a late 90s Destiny's Child music video. It's this gold on gold on gold on gold with gold sparkle handbags or something. I don't remember the details, but that looks nothing like the 1980s. Nobody ever dressed like that in the 1980s ever. Such a thing did not exist. Makes I don't understand how they. It's so deeply period inaccurate that it seems like a joke almost.
It's amazing. I know. How could they think that? I think it's they don't want to refuse the opportunity. They don't want to lose the opportunity to have that scene.
Yeah.
Because now is the time to have the scene. We're in 2001. Every movie and TV show has this scene of people shopping and a weird montage. Like, we have to have this scene. This didn't happen in the 80s, but we need to have it.
Yeah. Well, so that opens up naturally into this whole business with the Lion of Mark. Because that hat is I don't know why you would use a hat that has like information on it that boldly gives away this can't be in the 1980s. Like, why wouldn't you pick like an 80s Mickey Mouse hat or like a something that is indicative of the period? Instead, it's like this modern, like Y2K style kind of high Italian fashion thing for this Spanish racing team that had such a narrow window of existence. It came into that shocked me. I was like, okay, what is this thing from? And it's like 98 to 2001. Like, that's the only time period in which these hats existed. Why? It's such a weird specific thing too. That's so specific. It's not even like a well-known thing, I don't think. Have you ever heard of this racing team?
No.
Fuck, you know? Is that just someone's little joke, maybe? You know? Someone was a fan of that, who was doing the props or the costuming or something. It's like,
yeah.
But it's there in this important scene during the weird like time phase, like Dice is approaching you with your destiny sequence in the club. You know, that part that makes me want to vomit. It's like so weird and psychedelic. It's like time is breaking, and she's wearing that hat. She's wearing that hat. That's an actual anachronism in the image. Like, that has to do with the Bible. Like, it's like the Lion of St. Mark holding a Bible. It's like a hat that's a Bible. What the fuck is this movie, you know? Is Mariah Carey Christian?
Oh. I don't know. I'll check.
She has like Christmas songs, so I guess.
Yeah. That yeah, dude. What is that effect anyway? The sort of dice.
I'm gonna watch it. I'm gonna keep it up. By the way, I love this movie. It's just on YouTube in pretty good quality, because like YouTube's like scrub stuff is so great. This kind of thing, you know. It's really
yeah.
I wish I could have all of these movies on my phone easily indexable like this. This weird dice thing. It's pretty close to the beginning, right? Yeah, here it is. YouTube's gonna advertise something at me now. Yeah. Also, hold on a second. I'm sorry. I lost your audio because this is paired to my phone. Now it isn't. Can you say something?
Yep.
Okay.
Apparently, I don't think she's a Christian. At least Wikipedia doesn't say anything about it.
Okay, interesting. If she is, we don't know about it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm watching this. This is... Again, this does not look like the 80s. This club does not look like the 80s. Bright, like you said, if you think Bryce, Dice's hair does not look like an 80s haircut. I guess this like flow is pretty 80s when they're freestyling, you know?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's so weird. Dice is holding the microphone, which is very like N expected, you know? He's like the communication tower. And then he kind of like, he points at Billy, and then it cuts into footage that's running at half speed, you know? It's like slow, you know? It's not actually fluid slow motion. It's like stuttery slow motion. And that's very it's like a frame rate change, which is a really biologically disruptive thing to do in a film. Generally try to avoid that. And furthermore, it's not one, like, if you do that in a movie, you tend to want to go into something a little more deeply pulsy, I find, you know? Because that's less strange than going from fluid 24 frames a second to something that's suddenly like kind of like vibrating quickly. Like that's actually nauseating, you know? I feel like it's a weird decision to make, because then it cuts back to Dice. And now it's like Dice is moving at regular speed, but the background is still in a different frame rate. So now they're combining a fluid motion with a discontinuous motion, and also the discontinuous motion is smearing. So it's leaving a trace through time. It's like they've thrown a big echo effect visually onto the background, but not onto Dice's motion. So they show you this one thing that's immediately like disoriented, makes you feel sick, like this frame rate shift, and then immediately it cuts to a thing that's now like you thought that was bad, like we're gonna combine it now with the fluid motion again. Now now everybody in the background looks like some kind of horrifying ghost or spirit, you know?
Yeah,
it's like a dead lady. That looks like some kind of zombie ghost lady. And so he's kind of in the world
AI.
of the post, you know? It's all these cool colors back there, like cold. It looks like corpses underwater. It's really gross, implicitly. Now it cuts back to Billy. It's all in this weird stutter motion again. Then finally we snap out of it. We're back in kind of normal footage, and then she starts singing. But wow, like, first of all, that's like an effect shot, you know? So that had to have been like tightly considered and blocked out. How are we going to do this? We're going to separate Dice into this other layer and like process this other video stuff at this lower frame rate, and that, you know, that would have been a huge technical or not huge, but sizable technical process. You know, in the late 90s, early aughts. It does look like digital video, but that stuff is pretty new still, really. So I bet that was a lot of work, actually. I don't know. It's time. It's somehow they're implying like a time disruption, which is weird, because it's like Dice and Billy's trauma vortices are gonna become interlocked now, become entangled there. It's like that's the moment where there's no going, you know, it's somehow like this critical juncture. And at that moment, time becomes slow and fast at the same time, and the world of the dead kind of opens up visually. I really feel like the visuals are strongly suggestive of like everyone is dead now. We're in a dead world.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say. It's really powerful, actually. I don't know. I think.
Well, I'm just really confused as well, because Dice's apartment, to me, looks. I'm sort of more and more convinced that it's supposed to be hellish in some way.
Yeah, it's all this red everywhere.
It's this red everywhere. Like even the windows have this sort of red section to them. Yeah. The door has this red bit, and then I feel like there's honestly, it looks like the apartment is someone who's into kink. Like it's got that. It's like steel and red everywhere. You know, it looks like a Hellraiser interior. It looks like the interiors in Hellraiser 3, those New York City like BDSM interiors that Hitchcock is working with. You know, it really reminds me of that stuff. Alternatively, you might think it looks like the set to Kitchen, or like Hell's Kitchen, you know, in which they're, you know, it's like Gordon Ramsay's big emotional sadist, like House of Wonders or something, you know. It looks like that too, you know. Yeah, I isn't that weird because it does it. I completely agree. Every time I've watched it, when I get these big shots of Dice's apartment, I'm like, this is Hellraiser. This is a
Yeah.
Hellraiser apartment.
Yeah.
It's Hellraiser
Yeah.
3.
Yeah.
But then the club is Hellraiser 3 too. And then the fucked up thing
Yeah.
is the Dice is not only the owner of the apartment, he's also the owner of the club in the sense that he's the DJ of the club.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I didn't exactly piece
Right?
that.
So why does this similar aesthetic happen in Hellraiser 3 where the owner of the club and the like what?
Whoa. You know, Hellraiser is a film about a house that burns down. That's the big,
totally
basic shape of Hellraiser 1. But that's very weirdly connected too.
Yeah. So then, I mean, that's the weird thing, right? Because Dice's apartment is all these red windows. It's like it's on fire.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, and well, the steel makes it feel like well, I said already with Hell's Kitchen. It's like it's an oven almost. It's like they're in a big oven.
Right.
Especially the entrance, those steel doors with the red window. It's like an oven with a window of fire inside. And then we have the image of the implicit witch burning with the music video. So that's like a lot of fire stuff going on in this movie. It's got to be aware of the relationship of fire and glitter. And you know, the working title of this movie was All That Glitters Isn't Gold, or something like that. So I feel like there's a possibility there's a conscious attempt to draw it to the idea of alchemical transformation, you know, the alchemical gold. And the movie kind of shows that trajectory, right? Because with Timothy, that's like the false gold. It's you know, it's like a manufactured thing with a lie in it, you know. And what is it trying to be? It was trying to show you like the amazing example of the integrated identity or something. That's what this big sort of superstar Christ pop performer idea is. And Timothy's making a pastiche of it. It's not a real identity. Billy eventually becomes the real thing. So it is like the gold, the alchemical gold, you know?
Yeah. I feel like Billy has to become Dice somehow.
Yeah.
I think this is interesting also.
Well, because in the end, she kind of gives a rose to herself almost, you know? Just like Dice.
Yeah.
She has to be in I mean, it's kind of dumb almost in a way. She has to be in a relationship with herself first. She has to have love for herself first. She's seeking it in these other things. And because she's doing that, there's the possibility of these exploitations. And it kind of shows that even when intentions are good and so on, those exploitations can still just happen, like in the case of Billy and Dice. There is an exploitative aspect to it still. It's no one's fault exactly, maybe, in it. It's a consequence of how their situations and their traumas are interacting.
Yeah.
But simply by virtue of the fact that Billy is so interiorly damaged still, she doesn't love herself sufficiently, and that forces it into the projective arena in one's life. You encounter that problem then in your external relationships until you integrate your center totally. So I find Glitter to be a deeply like psychological movie.
Yeah. I mean, just the ending is so weird. The ending is so weird because she can't go on stage until she receives the news of Dice's death.
Yeah.
Right? Then after, like, so then that transforms that show into a sort of grieving moment. She's singing on stage, she's sort of crying on stage. She's sort of like,
yeah.
So then that enormous show of hers becomes this sort of public sort of exposition of trauma for everyone to see, kind of thing. And it's the most beautiful, like, performance. And then after having done that, she gets a letter from Dice, which is hilarious because it's read in such a way that it almost seems as if Dice is still alive. It's almost as if Dice's spirit has sent her a letter saying, I'm so happy for you. Oh, and by the way, your mom is back. It's like, okay, so it's like clockwork. It's like, okay, I needed to go through that. I needed for Dice to die and for me to be able to embody Dice and play that show in order to meet my mother. And then the final scene is her sort of returning back to the mother.
Yeah.
It's a really weird, like, mythological structure.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because it's a good example of an Animus movie. I haven't seen that many.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
It's an Animus movie. And then her mother at the end, I'm not sure, but would you say that her mother at the end is like a self image? Is she sort of like...
Yes.
Because she's integrated the Animus, she can go on to become the self, or to
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. Yeah. I hadn't seen that, but yeah,
weird.
Totally. It does follow that structure quite perfectly. Yeah, well, all this stuff together, it does make you. I mean, I find myself asking the same question I'm always asking with these movies. Like, did, like, people into the occult or, like, Jungian things or Joseph Campbellian things make this movie, or is it just kind of further evidence of the fact that these things just happen spontaneously?
Yeah.
It's
so strange.
The 9/11 stuff in this movie is really shockingly crazy. It kind of... There's so many pairs in it, like when they introduce, like, the record company, like, image consultants. Of course, it's like some guy in glasses and, like, a suit and then, like, a red hat. It's like basically like a little Eurythmics pair, which just allows for a bunch of matches to happen, There's Zemeckis interference in this film too.
Yes, absolutely.
When they get their first song on the radio, they're, like, in that cab, and there's, like, that like red digital numeric readout thing, like the front of the cab,
Oh, right.
And it says 55, which is like, that's the 1955. So that's like the year that Marty time travels to, and you see it on that same little red number thing right where the time controls would be in the DeLorean,
Oh, right. Wow.
I don't know.
Okay.
It just really...
I didn't know that.
Maybe that's subtle. To me, it didn't seem subtle. I was like, what? I'm in the Back to the Future shot now. I hate it when that happens. When Zemeckis material specifically appears in some of these movies. Like, in Mac and Me, that happens. There's, like, a DeLorean suggestions all over the place, kind of like in Moonwalker, it seems to happen. There's red twins named Biff, in Moonwalker, for instance.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And it happens in Glitter, like right when the message is being broadcast all over New York City or something too. So it really seems to kind of relate to that idea of the letter that that Marty writes to Doc, because then Billy gets this letter at the end too. I don't know.
Did you know? I don't know if you. I was just looking. There are 2 appearances of the Twin Towers in this movie.
Oh, 2, huh? I only remember 1.
Right. I noticed the second time. There's one is just after Dice kind of like storms out of the music video and like forces Billy to get out of the music
That's the
video.
one I remember, yeah.
The second one is around 1 hour and 17 minutes or so. It's just after Billy has broken up with Dice. She goes back to Roxanne and Louise's apartment. And then she's sort of like just walking down the street in this sort of sad moment. And you get this shot of the Twin Towers. And then it's just before she meets that sort of like Raphael, the French, I think, singer.
Right. Yeah, I'd forgotten about Raphael. This is an interesting character. What do you make of him?
Ooh. I don't know. I mean, what? Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, well, no. Just the first thing that comes to mind is that I think that I want to bring back up the topic of sexuality here for a second, because when Raphael sees Billy for the first time.
Oh, here are the twins. So I just thought we were talking about,
Yeah. And about the twins, see, it's not exactly like, it's not perfect, but I feel as if both times that they appear are sort of sad moments, in the sense that they're moments when Billy and Dice have had some sort of not an argument, but like Dice drags her out of the music video and she's like, why did you do that? And then the second time, Dice drags her out of the award ceremony because he's jealous of Raphael. So in a sense,
it's the same thing. It's his jealousy and his possessive.
It's literally exactly they're timed differently, but in both cases, it's Dice drags Billy out of some place because he's jealous, and it's because of sexuality specifically, right?
Yes,
and then after that, we get a shot of the Twin Towers.
Yeah.
So anyway,
God, yeah. Sorry, I'm just watching this area again. All the stuff we see on the TV, Of course, we have like redheads on this TV somehow. It looks like Joe Dante news footage, from Gremlins 2.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
She's holding like a 9 microphone. There's like 2 cops, or maybe 3, a bunch of police officers, we see all that stuff, and that's really, really close to when we then see the Twin Towers. They have that fight. Billy shows up in a red dress holding that cat, so she's like really essed out at that point. And their fight kind of happens in front of the twin steel doors with red hell portal design entrance to Dice's apartment. Then we see her kind of, she goes back to her old apartment with her friends.
Yeah. And
there's this sad montage. We see Dice smoking and playing his DX7 while he writes a song. So I find that very North Tower, because he's smoking and like microphoning in essence, like doing musical sound wave broadcast stuff or something. His black and white piano key thing. That's all. And then we see the the twins, and then you're right, and then immediately after that, we're introduced. It's funny how quickly this movie moves. Like, Dice and Billy have this fight, and then like immediately this other love interest is introduced. You know, there's no transitional space really.
Yeah. I remember feeling emotionally that was sort of a little too much. Like suddenly you like as a viewer, you're expected to swiftly transition from one emotion to the next.
Yeah.
Very easily.
Yeah.
Which is exactly the same that The Room does as well. Just that The Room is so ridiculous that it's difficult to emotionally invest that much. But unless you've watched it several times, then it becomes very emotional.
Well, so I was thinking about this recently in relation to something kind of adjacent.
Yes.
Which is like so I just want to make sure I like get through the idea correctly. It's like something with style that relates to the idea of like edginess, you know? So I was thinking about like what constituted edgy music in the 1970s, you know? And it was like kind of like the emergence of punk rock, you know? It was music that was using things that conventionally were thought of as being the stuff you wanted to avoid in music, more or less, like bad technique, really kind of like aggressive, abrasive sound, you know, not singing but kind of screaming and shouting, not kind of like a nice, clean, like full-bodied guitar sound, but like a cutting, jagged, distorted sound, you know, and etc. Right? That music was really an aggressive affront to the aesthetic status quo, and it did it by taking things that the status quo had rejected and making them the primary objects of aesthetic exploration, such that in punk rock you can compare and care about the different shouting styles of different vocalists and so on, and they develop it into its own thing, you know. Which in punk rock, it's not just about taking an aesthetic unit, but also kind of like an oppositional attitude too. That like in a punk context, we're going to be okay with accidents and spontaneities, and we're not going to focus too much on demonstrations of technique. It's more about getting something raw and emotive, you know, which was very anti relative to like the kind of prog rock tendencies that had been growing in the 70s at the same time, you know. There's Pink Floyd making these like very carefully considered masterpieces. So punk was kind of like pulling out in the direction of something more like live and primal and improvised also in a way, and so on. And so that's what was happening in the 70s. But it's like what starts to happen you see the seeds of it in the 80s, and it kind of is reaching fruition now or something, is you can't make something like that anymore because all of that stuff has been wrapped back up into the aesthetic status quo. There's nothing shocking about the sound or the approach of punk rock in 2021. This is like music from 50 years, half a century ago now, you know? Now the way that you get that thing is by taking entire styles like that aren't meant to go together, and you make these abrasive genre recombinations. You know, to a lot of people, like a smooth jazz thing on top of a heavy metal thing is a terrible thing. Like it ruins the metal. If you're someone who is into metal, or if you're someone who's into smooth jazz, you're absolutely not going to be probably someone who's into metal. Those are like kind of antithetical things. And so by smashing them together in some kind of weird like mutant remix object, you know, that's the only way to generate like a puncture in what's expected now, you see? I feel that after that, there's a move into sync. That's the only place to go after the genre recombination becomes reabsorbed into the status quo. Once we're really bored of recombining these things in these weird, shocking ways, the end result of all that aesthetic whiplash is a kind of schizophrenia or something. See, and I think that Glitter and The Room kind of touch on that. It's like you're saying that they oscillate so quickly between these emotional poles, and they combine. Like Glitter, you can't even figure out what decade it's supposed to be in, and it's like, is it a romance? Is it a tragedy? Is it a, is it a comedy? Is it a? It's very weirdly genre liquid, and I think that it's like on some level it is like kind of like scalar movement through popular culture or something. It's like in the beginning there was like a tightly controlled set of genres, and if you wanted to make things, you had to kind of make them within these like shapes, and then that starts to break apart. People start to develop these parallel underground forms, I guess this is probably always going on, because it's like even back in the Middle Ages, you had the same kind of thing with the distinction between like secular and sacred music, you had like a canon of music that was considered the correct kind of music. This was like Gregorian chant and things like this, and then you had stuff that was being made by the peasantry, basically, which was all kind of like bard music, and that kind of like stuff played on lutes, and often they were songs about sexuality and romance and secular concerns, etc. Profane music versus, etc. But so that I think that loop has been so accelerated in these capitalist Western societies that we've just moved into like this higher level with it recently, where now we're not really kind of, it's very hard now to invent a genre out of thin air. Everything has been, the sort of the archetypal poles in music have been really mapped at this point in our culture's kind of archive of information. We've explored so many ways to put music onto a recording now, from funk music through techno, gospel, acoustic folk music, recordings of indigenous music, recordings of symphony orchestras. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. You can't find a new heavy metal now, probably. Something like that would just be like, oh, we just do this different thing with this different instruments, and it's a whole genre now. Heavy metal happened because people discovered you could distort an electric guitar. Good luck finding something like that again, especially now that we have synthesizers and so on. Like, we've just heard a whole bunch of possibilities of sound at this point, And so now it's about taking those archetypes and putting them together to make higher order structure out of it, I feel like I'm just talking about Oneohtrix Point Never now. These are basically the things I would talk about if I was talking about that kind of music. But Glitter seems like it's of that stuff somehow. And that can't be deliberate. It's just like some weird accident of the movie sucking in some particular way or something. But it feels like a movie that has like, it has the implications of like a future cinema aesthetic in it, where these movements can be this abrupt, and it doesn't read as comedic. It's just part of the expected surreality of our moment, surveying this rich past media now, and figuring out how to use it to express the depth of the human spirit or something to tie it back in with glitter.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking something I think we were talking about last time about the Iron Eagle movies and stuff like that. That I feel as if movies that bomb at the box office are very interesting. They are like right. They are somehow an aesthetic of their own, like and I mean that like in like a serious way somehow, in the sense that it's not just that bombs that fail at the box office are bad movies which we enjoy watching because they're funny, but that, like you said, there are certain like artistic decisions that are made in these movies that are particularly like innovative, it seems. And I think like Nick Cage is a good example of that. He doesn't bomb at the box office, but I mean that a lot of his movies, right?
Sometimes he does.
Right, like, but like, I find it interesting. Exactly this sort of new ways of expressing things, new ways of acting, new ways of editing, new ways of filming things. Right, in a lot of ways, I think that movies that bomb, they bomb because they are editing, filming, and acting and writing in ways that are not. They're just not what's in fashion, right? But at the same time, it's not like an indie project. I think that's what I find interesting about these movies. It's not because an indie project, in a sense, doesn't bomb. An indie project can be very successful in indie festivals and in indie circles. But where something really bombs, there's something there. I don't know how to say it. Like I don't know. So yeah.
Yeah, well, it's because a true bomb is actually a bit of a rarity, maybe. Most movies are just kind of mediocre, but I think often when movies bomb, it's because there's something in them that's like implicitly offensive or maybe explicitly offensive, or it's like people don't like them. Now it could be just because it could be like a basic aesthetic rejection, of just like, this movie is so ridiculous, I just can't make any sense of it. It's or it could be simply like, this movie is so boring, I can't engage with it or relate to it. But it's interesting because those were all things that were leveled at like Blade Runner, for instance, when it debuted. People said that movie was boring and slow, and I guess, but I think it was more to the point that it was a very dark and unhappy vision of the future that wasn't palatable in 1982, which was a period of time in which the United States was imagining kind of utopic technological futures, or was moving into that kind of energy anyway. Blade Runner is such a downer, really. So I do think there's something about this, maybe something about that. But I don't know. I think that I don't know that glitter even bombed. I think it just.
Well, that's a good example.
It was like a kind of minor event that then just got completely forgotten about in the wake of 9/11.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It is an interesting example.
It was like
right?
It was like a New York movie. If glitter was going to have an audience, it was going to be probably like New York audience. I guess. The fact that it's just weird that that it is such a New York movie.
Well, yeah, yeah, yeah,
she
yeah.
anyway. That's what Mariah Carey said about it. She blamed its failure on 9/11, which I think she was kind of criticized for doing. But I don't know. Is that such an unreasonable thing to say? Makes sense to me. 9/11 disrupted all kinds of shit. I'm sure it was. I'm sure it did, affect the performance of every single movie that was in theaters at that time.
Well, and then obviously this movie is so obviously like using the symbolism of the twins, right?
Yeah.
There are twinned things all the time.
Yeah.
And there are references to fire, and like it's obviously like woof. I can imagine it being a really like like you wouldn't want to watch this movie on the week of 9/11.
Totally.
But for weird unconscious reasons, right? Like
the obvious mythic relationship, I guess, is Jacob and Esau, because they're the big twins or whatever, and it's a ritual sacrifice story. Or at least that's how Gerard identifies it. All that stuff with the cooking of the meat and all this kind of like sacrificial substitution thing in his view. And so it makes sense to see that stuff in relation to some of the more explicit imagery we get, like Billy being burned in this weird witch burning music video. And, if I'm an intelligent person, I'm writing this script, I know a little bit about Bible stories and mythology and things like this. And I know we're making this thing about fire and trauma and transformation. That does seem like kind of the main kind of deep themes or something of this piece. It's not so far fetched that I might find my way to Jacob and Esau and think, yeah, we'll put some twin stuff in here somehow. I don't know. You can kind of imagine it, but none of that can account for red on the left-hand side, I'm afraid, which happens so much in this movie. Have you noticed that as much as me?
Oh yeah. No, I have. Like, no, totally. I mean, I definitely
really
feel
amped in this one. It seems like really a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah. I know. I mean, and it's something that I feel personally, like I know I've mentioned this before, but it's like I personally feel the left side of my body differently from the right side of my body.
Me too. Yeah.
And somehow having red or warm colors to the left side of things seems to flow better with how my body is feeling, even. So like somehow it creates a weird dissonance to put a cold element on the left, which can be an interesting dissonance artistically and stuff. But
you're right. I think you're right about that.
But and also like
so that indicates that it is probably some like really deep example of archetypal organization.
And I don't think that, and again, because I don't think that means that this is all projective, that this is all some sort of human projection.
No, of course.
But that somehow there's just something weird about the left hand side. I don't know what it is. The left hand path. I don't know.
So the left hand is connected to the right brain, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So that's the weird thing about the 9/11 image, is that it shows you two things that are visually differentiated in a way that corresponds to aspects of the hemispheres, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You have one that is warm, fiery, amorphous and contains many implicit pictures in a way, that explosion.
Yeah.
And it's something implicitly violent or erotic, or it therefore relates to kind of primal instincts or something like that, which I don't know exactly how that relates to the hemispheres, but I think there must be some kind of a relationship, because it's the right hemisphere that's involved in intuition and kind of broad environmental sensing of the sort that animals do, and so on. Anyway, and then you have the North Tower that's like, first of all, it's definite, it's rigid, it does implicitly suggest the image of a doctor, so it's analytic, maybe. It's about communication, language. That's definitely left hemispheric.
It's
got the cool colors, the metal colors. It's like the mechanical half, as opposed to the living, breathing, organic, holistic half or something, which is the South Tower.
Yeah.
So it gives you those two things, and then it positions them in such a way where the image that is in resonance with the left hemisphere is being processed by the left hemisphere. and the image that's in resonance with the right hand, because we have red on the right, but because it's crossed over in our brain, that means that we're seeing the red material through the left eye, which is actually the right brain. So we're seeing the image of the right brain with the right brain, and the image of the left brain with the left brain. That puts it into like a correct resonance.
Yeah. No, and this blows my mind, because I've noticed this in almost every video game that I've analyzed and everything. Almost all promotional art.
I know, it's just everywhere.
For Mario games or Donkey Kong games, it's always, or at least I've noticed a significant amount. We've both noticed significant amount of sort of wild nature stuff on the left, and then mechanical stuff on the right, or that's a sort of clear sort of pattern in this stuff.
That's one of the interesting things about it is it's not just about this color temperature issue. It's also things that kind of symbolically relate to the idea of the hemisphere, like a bush. The right hemisphere has nothing to do with foliage, except in its character as something that it actually does in a way. Sorry, it's not even true. It does, because it's the hemisphere that kind of is used, I guess, to understand natural form. The left hemisphere knows how to measure straight lines and do things like that. The right hemisphere is what's involved in kind of gestalt perception of fluid natural forms more. The body as a whole is kind of processed by the right hemisphere. The left hemisphere sees parts of the body, but the right hemisphere sees the whole body. I think that's how McGilchrist puts it anyway. So it probably does actually relate in a direct way to those kinds of... Those are objects in the world that we use the right hemisphere to relate to often. And so in our media reproductions, we tend to place it in the area visually that hemisphere is active in processing.
Oh, dude, that's amazing. Right. Fuck. Yeah. That is
We're like aligning things symbolically onto our picture grid in a way that actually kind of like information theoretically aligns with this basic structure. That is generating the picture. That's really strange, yeah.
Right, and because we're wanting to see that somehow, because right, those are the images that we popularize. Big blockbuster movies, we make famous images that do that. We give our full attention and we put our money into somehow, right? But then at the same time, there's a story about precognition here,
and our religious faith in historically.
Oh, right. Yes,
the big,
exactly.
The big religious images are always these pairs, you know.
Yeah. Oh, right. Of course.
At least in Christ, you know, his like bloody wound is definitely on the left-hand side of that image, you know. So
yes,
you see that appearing in the religious images too, I think.
Yeah. I keep thinking exactly of that's the thing, right? Because I think on the image of Christ on the cross, his wound is on the left side of the image, as you said, right? So then that's funny because as a viewer,
the twins appear too with the thieves. So it's like definitely hemispheric symmetry, you know. You have the two thieves that are crucified along with Christ.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Visually flank him on either side, and then the wound is on that. So it's the twin with the red left twin.
Yeah. So and this is something that I don't know. Because I don't know how much of this is just me or this is how bodies work, but I feel as if when I get stressed out or anxiety, it for me at least, this is probably just personal, but it really like means that the left side of my stomach, like also my left side gets really like intense, like clamped up. This is maybe just super personal, but it feels as if I wonder if maybe I'd be curious to know how other people relate to this, because I feel as if maybe because stress has something to do with synchronicity, I think, right? When you see a lot of stuff, it like
yeah absolutely. Well, synchronicity, as we might learn from the cover image to that The Time song, is a lot about surprise. You also see it on the Back to the Future big Holy Christ Marty poster, you know. It's got that, you know, it's all that kind of shock. That is like related to stress. It's like a spike, you know, in your nervous system or something. But it's not necessarily the interesting thing about an authentic surprise is it's a bit empty of content initially. You don't know what it is yet. It might be a good surprise. That initial shock might give way into an immediate feeling of satisfaction and happiness. That, oh my God, it's my friend saying happy birthday to me. Surprise birthday party, you know. Or it might be shock because, you know, like some wild animal is like jumped out at you and is attacking you. But in that first initial state, it's this purer kind of sudden perspective shift. Something that you had been ignoring is now in front of you, but you don't know what it is yet. It's like right on the razor edge of the future turning into the present. You know that something is happening, but you don't know exactly what it is yet. It's that liminal space. It's no longer completely in unawareness, no longer fully in awareness. It's going through the pipe, the elevator shaft from the unconscious to the conscious. It's about the moment of the flip from unconsciousness into consciousness, which is a kind of surprise, of course. So synchronicity is involved in that transition, it seems. As the content emerges into consciousness, there are these weird non-localities that it pulls up with it as it takes on its definite shape. And I keep on thinking that it has to do with the relationship of possibility to actuality in some weird way. It seems to me that in the unconscious, it's many things existing together. And when it's into consciousness, though, it has to be something precise in order to be perceived. And so that's why the unconscious uses symbols, because it can have its cake and eat it. It can give you something specific, but that contains within it a multiplicity of things still. That's the in between. It is the symbol.
I see what you mean.
Bridges those, it bridges the infinite possibility of the pleroma in the unconscious with the single-pointed articulation of ego perception. The symbol is one thing that you can just encounter as a totality, and yet it suggests in it multiplicity of things. Often opposites too can get along in one symbol.
Yeah.
It's hard not to draw the connection to quantum ideas, it's a wave and a particle until you measure it, and then it collapses into a, it's as if the particle is in many possible states, and only when you measure it does it become one actual state, So the symbol is a thing that is one state, but that can form like a mental bridge back to all those other possible states. It includes in it some of the waves still in its particle. See?
See, I find this is weird in relation to glitter because because Billy has these two friends, right? Roxanne and Louise. And so there's something that the European movie director says. He says several things that are just weird. One of them is the glitter shouldn't overpower the artist. He says that.
Yes, yeah.
Which I think is funny that he says that. But then at the same time, he says that weird sentence of is she white? Is she black? We don't know. She's exotic.
Yeah.
And it's something else that is what attracts us, or something like that. So that's what it draws us towards her.
Yeah, he's dropping a union of opposite things there almost.
Yeah. And so I find that funny because then the movie takes that idea and runs with it somehow, explores it, because on the one hand, right, the director makes this comment, and I wouldn't be surprised. I can't remember now. I think so the first nightclub, like you said, there's these sort of obvious weird alchemical images. There's someone dressed as a sun, someone dressed as a moon. There's obvious sort of idea of opposites in an alchemical sense. That's the first time they go to the club. The second club they go to has a different theme. The people at this club are dressed literally in black and white themes or images. There's at least a couple. I will not find the screenshot now, but there's a moment where there's someone with their face literally painted in black and white. So one half of their face is white, the other half
I
is
remember
black.
that. I do remember that. Yeah.
And then there's someone else in this club who's wearing a zebra thing, just black and white stripes kind of suit.
Yeah.
So you're okay. The music video moment, and then then you bring this up in the club, and then it becomes difficult not to see Roxanne and Louise as opposites for various reasons. First of all, they're associated to red and blue in the very first adoption, not adoption, the sort of orphanage shot.
Yeah.
Right. One it has like Louise has darker skin than Billy, and then you could argue that Roxanne has lighter skin than Billy. There's also like a sort of thing like that. Louise is sort of plumper than Billy. Roxanne is skinnier than Billy. Right? They have this weird.
They exist in a definite opposite relationship. I agree.
Where I thought it was hilarious.
Well, and if Billy is kind of the Christ figure, they really are like the twins, the two thieves. You know. If it's a crucifixion image all the time with Billy or something, which is suggestive there with the witch burning and all that. That's quite a bit like a crucifixion too, you know.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah.
Then they're like the two thieves or something.
Yeah.
Or something. Maybe that's too much, trying to force it in the direction of the image of the crucifixion specifically. And not all images of the crucifixion even include the thieves. They're kind of a more esoteric aspect or something. But they're certainly a bit like apostles or something, you know. They're like the first people on Team Billy, you know. They just believe in Billy and are there to help her whenever capacity, when she needs to, you know, when her life falls apart after the thing with Dice, like she goes back to that core friend circle, and they welcome her back in instantly with it's true unconditional love, actually, in some ways represented in that trio.
Yeah.
But anyway, I agree that they're very much like two opposites. I suppose they do probably represent in some basic way just the two halves of Billy's personality, you know.
It's just I don't know, it's weird.
It's very weird. The film manages to be really scary, I think. I think you said it, that it's not just that it sort of includes like stuff that visually looks a bit like Hellraiser and so on, like it just has like the mood of a horror movie in it somehow. I'm not even sure how to explain it. Everything feels kind of ominous, and
Yeah,
I don't know how to describe it.
I think, in a sense, maybe it's because you can never relate to any of the characters exactly, because, like, take that Raphael scene we were saying. Billy has just been in this moment where she was crying after dumping Dice, or she was sort of, there's this sad music.
Yeah.
And so you as a viewer are supposed to be in that mood because she's the protagonist. So you're going along with her. You're riding that mood. But then the mood shifts are so sudden that you can't keep up with them. So when the next scene, Billy is smiling and laughing and having fun with Raphael, you still have some weird dark feeling in your heart.
Yes.
So the movie is trying to pretend that this is a happy scene, but it can't be a happy scene because you're not. You haven't been given the space to be happy, and this is partly why I feel that a lot of the scenes with Dice are very strange as well, because there are these moments where Billy shows this sort of resistance to being with him, especially at the start. She's like, I'm not gonna sleep with you, I'm not gonna kiss you.
He just keeps insisting that it's not a date and all this, and like he's not bringing her up to his apartment. To sleep with her. I don't know if we're supposed to think that Dice is just running game on her, or if it's more like Dice authentically has himself convinced that that's not what he's doing here, and doesn't, doesn't realize his own motivations, even, which would fit in with your theory that he might be a very traumatized person as well. He's not. It's not really fully conscious to him what he's the decision he's making there or something.
It does, yeah, and it does give that sense sometimes, doesn't it? Because Dice sometimes feels like he's younger than he is or something. I don't know how
Yes, yeah, no, exactly. He's yeah, he's like a young. He seems younger than he is. That's exactly it. What's up with that? So. I don't know. I'm really starting to have the feeling that like all of the male characters in this movie are the same character. He's starting to feel that way. And like Dice, Timothy, Raphael, these are the same character in some way.
Okay.
They're all animus, I guess. It's all animus figures relative to Billy.
Yeah.
And so they're representing different aspects of masculine psychological energy.
Yeah.
And it's notable that, Billy had no father. She had an abusive mother, basically, and no father, Yeah. And there is a sense in which there's a movement through these figures she's projecting her animus onto in the direction of better and better people for her, right? With Timothy, it's kind of really not a great situation. With Dice, it's better, but there's still all these, and then with Raphael, that seems like the indication of like, well, here's someone who's really like Billy, more so than Dice was, and maybe more of a straight shooter, more.
Yeah.
I don't know. But that would track the idea of Billy processing her own trauma too. It's like when has more of that trauma, she's with, what do we think about Timothy? Timothy probably comes from some background of intense like poverty and trauma and who knows what. So there is still this notion of like, so people come into your life that meet you at your level of work or something. It's a very alchemical movie.
Yeah. I love that idea. You're right. It does seem to take those stages. Because then the whole Raphael scene is so weird. Like, what's the point? Like, unless you read it in this alchemical way. Because, okay, they make this single with Raphael. And it's the first time that she has, like, a duet with someone. So, like you say, she's sort of... there's more of a mutual understanding artistically, sort of spiritually, like that they're sort of making art at the same level, sort of thing. Whereas with Dice, like you say, it was better than Timothy, but there was still this sense that, okay, me, Dice, I'm producing you, the singer.
Yeah, well, you know what, dude? It also kind of relates to ideas about codependency, because it's like Timothy really needed Billy, actually, to have any shot of making any of that stuff work,
Yeah.
Dice is actually quite talented himself, He's a musician. The movie really goes to pains, actually, to show you. Like, this guy can actually play the fucking marimba. He's not just like a DJ. He name drops Quincy Jones and all this bullshit, He's like a serious musician, but he's not a singer. Dice himself is not a star, probably. He needs Billy to add the star power to make his songs work. But then with Raphael is like himself a star, probably, right? He doesn't need Billy to have
that's
a career,
exactly.
So they're equals. That's a relationship that can now be equal.
That's
the trauma
exactly right.
keeps it from being equal.
Yeah.
What a movie.
That's crazy, man. Like when you say that like that, you realize this is exactly it. Yeah. It's funny, like the movie is doing that.
Yeah, it must be because like you say, that's the only reason to introduce Raphael. Really,
Yeah.
he only appears in that one scene, right?
Yeah.
When they're kind of making the track together.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Well, no. Well, and he appears like when she meets him for the first time. Is it this award ceremony?
That's the award ceremony, right? I forgot about that. Yeah.
She hears him sing and everything. But so then it's funny because they make this track together, and then that scene transitions directly into Billy making a phone call, trying to get back in touch with Dice.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Interesting.
Which
that's often how it is, I think.
Right.
You don't think you deserve the new path that's opened up. And you think, maybe I should go back to this old situation, which is what I really deserve somehow.
Yeah. It's funny, though, in the light of what you've just said, I just realized that there's some interesting way of reading this, too, because this is the scene, this is the weird scene where suddenly they make a song together.
Yes.
They sort of like telepathically make the same song. He writes the melody and she writes the lyrics.
Yeah. What is that scene?
So she has just made a song on equal terms with Raphael, and it's almost like now she is ready to make a song on equal terms with Dice.
Nice. I see. Yeah.
But it's too late. He's not dead yet, but he's dead in a sense. The telephone is the same. The telephone is the same color as her clothes, which I find hilarious. I don't know why they do that. Like, she's dressed in orange.
I know.
Yeah.
The making of this song.
It's such an explicit synchronicity too. It's like literally
exactly.
They have a synchronicity. The characters in the movie experience a synchronicity, and they realize it. Well, she realizes it. Like what?
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to like. What is the significance of? I mean, I suppose partly it must just be about trying to honor the relationship with Dice. To say, look, even though this isn't the relationship that Billy is going to end up in or something, and not really the one she ultimately deserves or something. It was still a relationship that had love in it and that allowed her to grow into the person that can meet Raphael. And so having made that song with Raphael, she understands now that the song she wove metaphorically with Dice, the relationship, was like the prelude to the song with Raphael. And so now she's going to, they're gonna honor that by making this representation of it with the song or something.
Yeah.
That's interrupted by a resurgence of trauma when Timothy kills Dice. Dice's trauma, in a way, was too deep or too unaddressed, or something, or maybe it's just more random than that. But if we were gonna think about it in this sort of more meaningful way, like if Dice was fated to die in some way, then it would, I would probably relate it to that kind of idea that he couldn't escape the dynamics of his own trauma that caused him to abuse this other more traumatized person that then ended up resulting in his death. It's a very dark, but very realistic kind of reminder about the stakes of this stuff. They can have the intention to write that song and make that piece, but they never actually get to make that song. It's just an intention that the two of them have simultaneously, a possibility for the future, song for Billy, melody for Billy, or whatever it is he writes. That, you know, is cut off violently.
That's bizarre, man. Yeah. What you just said about like Dice being sort of destined to die. There's this weird line. I hadn't read it this way, but they have their final fight, and Dice is like, "Do you really think you could have made it in this world if it wasn't for me?" Right? And you know, without and then Billy is like, "Well, without me, you'll have nobody to bail your ass out," or something like that. And she does something that sort of implies that he's been getting into trouble, right? He got into a fight with Timothy.
Yeah, that's a really good catch. Yeah, shit.
So there's this, and that's kind of eerie when you read it in this sense, because you really get the sense that, oh fuck, in a sense, Tim is only alive. Not Tim, sorry. Dice is alive because he's with Billy. If he wasn't with Billy, he would be getting into all sorts of trouble. He would be making promises that he couldn't keep, and he would be getting into fights. That's kind of fucked up. That's sort of sad.
It's very sad. Yeah.
That's weird. Yeah. Because then the second they break up, he dies because he has no one to like.
What an interesting movie. To call it glitter, it's kind of like saying, like, look, here's the facade of celebrity, okay, but behind this is all this trauma and all this, you know. It's a deep kind of movie to make as a pop star, you know. You know, because I was used to things like Spice World, you know, which is a deep movie in its own way too, of course. But
I haven't watched.
I don't think it's like literally that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and there's something eerie as well, because there's something eerie about Mariah Carey's voice as well. It's sort of similar with all these really good singers like Michael Jackson or whatever, that it's just, her voice is so good that it's almost scary. It almost feels like, it reminds me of moments in which I've been happy with how I've been singing in my room or whatever. The moments in which I'm happy with how I'm singing are moments in which I really feel like I'm singing from a place of emotion somehow.
Yeah.
Right? When I feel that I'm not just sort of mechanically singing the notes, but the singing is coming literally from some sort of deeply felt emotion in my heart. And
that means that you're doing like a physical pattern that's in resonance with an interior state, you know. That feels so good. Like it's like being an open window, and what's inside is like coming outside correctly, you know.
Yeah. And that always sort of frightens me, because it makes me think that these incredible singers, in order to sing that way, does it, you know, do you have to really be feeling that much? Or maybe you don't have to feel it, but it sort of suggests that, again, that
no, I think you're right. You're right.
That somehow, maybe this is too sort of frivolous a way to put it, but the trauma is like the ground on which talent grows in some way, and it doesn't have to be individual trauma. It can be family trauma.
It's also just symbolic of like how to make peace with trauma is by sharing it with the collective again in a way that allows healing, you know. That's the big alchemical view, I think, of it, is like, by processing your own trauma, you're also healing a bit of the big total heart, you know. It's that basic sort of we're all going to repair ourselves together. man in the mirror, Michael Jackson, alchemy idea. And so the whole singer performer thing is just a great symbol for that. It's kind of so direct. Like you have to what you can do is you can make peace with your trauma such that you can use it in a healing way by offering that emotion. People in a new context, basically.
Yeah.
And I think it does. It require, that's why the movie is so interested in, like, is it a witch burning, or like what is this? On the one hand, we have these performers that are doing something very emotionally demanding, probably to kind of keep replaying pieces of their trauma in some way in order to find these vulnerable states, etc. And then there's this whole industry that just makes money off that. Seems like maybe that's not so great, like, because this is something that's so core to kind of the spirituality of human beings. It ought to be, I just think about Christ like trashing the market.
Yeah.
It's like it ought to be in a church. I've been watching a ton of gospel music lately. It just seems it just seems like singing used to exist in a more explicitly religious or spiritual context. This relates back to what we were talking about before, I guess, the profane versus the sacred trajectories in music. I guess maybe there's, they combine in funny ways. Enigma was all about that. Literally taking Gregorian chant and putting like dance, like sensual dance music beats underneath it,
Yeah.
Anyway.
That's funny because I've been listening to a lot of like church music recently as well.
Really?
Yeah. Like I've been listening more to like choirs. I don't know what kind of historical era this sort of music would fall under, but just the general idea of like church organ and a lot of people singing over it, like hymns and stuff like that. Like I'm obsessed with that sort of music at the moment. I don't know what, like, it's something about it. And the way in which the voice is used there.
Totally. Yeah. Oh, man. What is the very final image in this movie? It's Billy with her mother.
Yes. It pans out into some trees, I think.
Through all of that, then, she's able to forgive her mom, I guess. She's able to see how my mom really did love me, maybe in the same way that Dice really loved me, but was just unable to give me what I needed because of her own trauma and her own, the way that her mom was sinking her trauma into her alcohol addiction, basically. It feels like a very AA movie, again. A lot of these movies have this kind of vibe of like, there are things that imply kind of like giving up, like going sober or something, like in Critters, that character kind of like throws his alcohol away or something when he realizes space aliens are real, There's often little movements like that, or like in The Mouth of Madness. It's like there's all that stuff, like kind of like putting out the cigarettes into the cup that, like the mug that says "In the Mouth of Madness" on it, etc. I don't know. In this set of movies, I detect a thing that kind of seems to go along with the notion of Christian healing, or not Christian healing, but like healing through Christ. You know, so like,
Yeah.
You can try to heal in these other ways that don't actually work ultimately.
Yeah.
By just feeding it with an addiction or repressing it or doing high risk seeking activity like DICE is doing or this or that. You know, those things don't really cut it. What cuts it is loving yourself, which is the Christ love idea. You know.
Yeah.
And then extending that forgiveness like everywhere to yourself and outwardly, so that allows the authentic forgiveness, since the mother and daughter can come back together. I guess maybe we assume that mom can not be an alcoholic anymore or something. I don't know. It kind of has that vibe.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's crazy, man. Because Dice even mentions it in his letter. He says she's been clean for several years or something like that.
Oh, does
sober.
he? Okay, I forgot that. Well, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
right, because it's funny because Billy sees someone on the streets who reminds her of her mother.
Yeah.
This homeless woman.
Yeah, that's right.
So Billy still has an image of her mother as someone who has a problem with alcohol, even though she doesn't. But she doesn't know that.
Well, and what's interesting too, you know, is how many times do we suppose Billy might have seen some homeless person around New York City and not made the connection back to her mom? You know, it's like that's a projective. You know, she's catching a reflection of her trauma in this other thing she's seeing, but it's only possible for her to kind of know that that's happening after she's done all this integration, you know. This time, it reminds her of her mom consciously, and it directly precedes this reunion with her mom, you know. I find that's interesting. It's suggestive of, like, you know, you become ready to see those connections. It's like Danny. Don't go in room 237 is correct probably for Danny. When it's shut, you shouldn't pry it open. You're repressing stuff about your trauma as a protective measure. It's like you will allow yourself to see those connections when you're ready to see them.
Totally.
When Danny enters the room, the door is already open, you know. It's an invitation to maybe now I'm ready. So this movie seems to basically kind of follow that too. If we read the interaction with that homeless woman, and it's kind of like a little bit of a synchronistic context because it's proximate in time to the actual reunion with the mom, you know.
You know, it's strange because her mother, at the beginning of the movie and at the end of the movie, both moments, many years have gone by, but in both moments, she's wearing a red headband.
Yeah.
And that homeless woman she sees also is wearing a red headband.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. Shit.
So then it's like, okay, her mother wears a red hat, which is what Billy is wearing.
Yes.
Maybe Billy is wearing a red hat in honor of her mother or something, you know, it's some sort of like a reminder of her mother. It also sort of suggests, obviously, that her mother has red, flaming hair. I don't know.
Fuck, dude. How is this movie about all this stuff, and then it's also so 9/11-y, you know? And the connected with it. It's just very... I've got to say, this stuff lately, I'm really taking like a more like deeply Philip K. Dick kind of turn with it or something, you know. I'm like, maybe 9/11 really was like a time portal, like literally, like we're in like a fake reality now, or or it was fake before it or something. I mean, not really, I guess, but like, there's just this funny aspect of like that event broke hearts all over the world. Everybody had someone in the towers or knew someone who had someone in the towers. You know, it was like that because that's what it was like there. It was a global situation. Had there been a properly global trauma like that ever before? Ever? Experienced together like that? Actually experienced together in real time like that? All those shattering hearts all at the same time, looking at the same picture. I don't know. That seems like so significant. We didn't know exactly we were paving the way for something like that when we introduced television and then live broadcast and then all this stuff, and we got very used to sitting our kids down in front of it, and and then one day just this thing happened through it. No warning. That was a huge big trauma, and that for many people was like really actually super heavy trauma. Like dad is dead now, it's just so remarkable that a film like Glitter should be made in a way that ends up just connecting it to that. Whether it's precognitive or not, it's like you can't watch that movie now and not think a little bit about 9/11 because it has these images of the Twin Towers in it. And it's all set in New York City immediately before it happened. And then there just, I guess, somehow is this natural resonance between all these weird things in this movie with all the fire stuff and buildings on fire and witch burning subliminals and all this other stuff going on that exists in synchrony with how 9/11 happened. It creates a natural kind of connection. It's just like it forces you in a way to read Glitter as commentary on 9/11, and then it works because it's all about processing traumatic memories and growing from that, which is what 9/11 is about, has to be about as a big collective global trauma. It just creates a hermetic connection between the big trauma and the personal trauma of Mariah Carey.
Yeah.
It also is how Moonwalker works and how all these movies maybe work. It's like a lot of them seem to have this in them. They're like Freaked is like that. It's like autobiographical trauma working out. And I wonder if like Gremlins isn't a little bit that way for Joe Dante somehow. There's a lot of weird dark material in Gremlins about suicide on Christmas and yada yada yada. The implicit sexual abuse going on with what's Billy's? What's the name? Billy. What is Billy's girlfriend's name? In Gremlins?
Oh right, I can't remember.
Whatever. Someone abuses her on Christmas or Thanksgiving. I don't remember exactly what's implied in it.
Oh yeah, you remember.
But
Kate.
Kate. Yeah. Like what the fuck, Like if I went to see Glitter and then 2 days later 9/11 happened, I would have in my head this big story and a whole bunch of imagery and stuff that I could use to make sense of 9/11, like ready to hand,
Yeah.
It's like my culture just like made a myth for me to help me with a thing that hadn't quite yet happened, and then it happened and it was just ready to go.
That's a good point.
Was that an accident? It almost seems like it couldn't be because it's so perfect,
Yeah.
But that's the basic mystery of this thing. It's like we just see that like it's like our culture made a bunch of myths that suddenly we know what they were about, maybe.
Yeah.
Or beginning to realize this is what they were about.
That's really good. That's a really good answer. Like I hadn't seen it that way. That maybe precognition right? We sometimes always think of it as being a warning. Like, you get a precognition about an event and then it happens. And you're like, shit, that precognition was meant to warn me to try and prevent it. Maybe it's not about preventing it. Maybe it's just a way to deal with the trauma. The precognitive event is something to get you acquainted. It's to get your body acquainted with the emotional sort of content of that trauma, so that when you receive it, it's not such a full blow. It doesn't completely
That's it.
Throw you.
It's exposure therapy in reverse, in a way. It's like pre-gaming exposure therapy or something. Because with exposure therapy, the idea is there's something that happened in the past, and so you're going to recreate it. This thing that happened in the past, you're going to remake in some quasi-pretend way in the present to expose yourself to the trauma again, so that you can process it consciously, right? But what we're seeing, it's like that before the trauma has happened. It's kind of giving you a pre-exposure therapy or something.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
It's giving you like some content about it before it happens, so that you can deal with it when it happens. But isn't that funny? Because that's essentially what the predictive programming folks say about all this stuff. They see that as a nefarious part of the plot, that's why it's predictive programming. They're trying to get you ready for it so that you'll accept the false flag event when it happens, so that you're
right.
It's kind of similar to that idea in a way.
Interesting.
But yeah, it just has that effect. Like when it's so interesting. It almost doesn't matter if it's accidental or not. You know what I mean? Is it like even if it just happens somehow accidentally? There's no way that your psyche isn't gonna benefit from it or be able to use it. And the fact, that's evidenced by so many things, but in that connection, I really think to the censorship surrounding these things. Like suddenly we couldn't see Spider-Man on the Twin Towers, we didn't want to think about that, and why should it matter? Well, it matters because the meaning has changed.
Yeah. Before the event, it was one movie, and then after the event, it's a different
movie. Yeah. And at that time, we weren't ready to consider maybe Spider-Man could be a movie about 9/11. Still, it's a hard sell, kind of. You got to say, like, look, it's about, because it feels like you're degrading 9/11 somehow if you do that. 9/11 is saying serious treaties should be written about it. It can't be possible that there's like an accidental, stupid movie called Spider-Man that could shed meaningful spiritual insight onto an event like 9/11.
Yeah, dude, fuck. That's exactly it. Isn't it? That's funny. Like, meaningful commentary on serious events is being written in the trash. Yeah. And because of that, it doesn't get acknowledged as that's funny. Yeah.
Well, and that's Billy's journey. She is like trash, discarded. She's abandoned, essentially. And then it's the journey of her into visibility, the playing of the song through the radio, and it's the recovery of the gold that was thrown away.
Fuck, dude.
Not the glitter, but the gold,
Oh. Shit. This is a good movie.
Yeah, it's a really good movie.
That sucks.
It's actually such a good movie. Holy shit. It's stylistically really weird. And maybe not intentionally weird stylistically, but it's really a nice script. It makes sense it was written by a playwright.
Yeah. It's weird though, because like I I also, I mean, that's the thing, right? I hated it. I didn't like it at all the first time I watched it.
Yeah.
I think I don't know. Yeah, so many thoughts about this.
Well, I was thinking we've been talking for about 2 hours about glitter.
Yeah.
Maybe it's enough about glitter.
Yeah.
Do you want to get off video and just chat for a while?
Yeah. I'll
Cool.
I'll stop recording.
We can keep talking about sync stuff if you want. On video.
No. I think this is a good point. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. I really enjoy talking about glitter anyway.
Yeah.
A crazy movie for sure. I'm sure we'll talk more about it.
Yeah, no, I feel like I could talk more about it, but like again, I think we need to digest sort of some of what.
Totally.
Okay, I'll sort of stop recording then.
Yeah.